This is the Detroit History Podcast. I'm Tim Kiska. Before the automotive industry became the main force in this town, lumber barons ruled this place. Not only Detroit, but the entire state of Michigan. They had big money, and they reveled in their power. Historians of their era talk about pine and politics. There were 5 Michigan governors, a couple of U.S. senators, and countless others who parlayed their lumber fortunes into clout. We'll talk about an iconic mansion one of those barons left behind. That era may be over, but maybe not totally. We're going to talk about ghosts, disembodied spirits that are still around. This audio is from the Haunt Investigators of Michigan, a local ghost hunting group that has looked for spirits in the Whitney.
This is the spirit telling us to get out. You hear that?
You've probably heard of the Whitney restaurant on Woodward Avenue immediately south of Wayne State University's campus. It's one of the city's most elegant restaurants, housed in an amazing building. You've heard the name before, in connection with the restaurant, but also in connection with the David Whitney building in downtown Detroit. It's on the edge of Grand Circus Park. You can see that building if you're watching a baseball game at Comerica. For the sake of accuracy, we need to say it was David Whitney's son who built the downtown skyscraper. But who exactly is David Whitney? Coming out of the Civil War, as the country grew, we needed wood, and a lot of it, to build homes, to build furniture, to build any number of things. New York and Pennsylvania were centers for logging activity. But as those states ran out of trees to cut down, the lumber folks surveyed the state of Michigan, and oh boy, they found a whole lot of wood. According to historians Willis Dunbar and George May, 150 billion board feet of pine. As Dunbar and May put it, enough to cover the entire state of Michigan with enough left over to cover Rhode Island. Here's historian James Moriarty, who has studied Whitney's life and is the unofficial historian of the place.
Some people will tell you that between 1860 and 1910, that there was more money made in the lumber industry in Michigan than had been made in the California gold rush. They used to call it green gold. Mr. Whitney, of course, participated in the development of the industry, and when he died in 1900, he was the wealthiest man in Detroit.
Great fortunes were made. In one year, 1888, the state's sawmills cut 4.3 billion board feet of wood. One of the folks who was drawn here was a young man by the name of David Whitney. He was 27 years old when he got here, the son of a family that had been living in the Boston area way before we even became the United States of America. David Whitney made millions from the lumber, making him the biggest lumber zillionaire in the state, perhaps in the country, and it made him one of the richest men in town. The wealthiest man in Detroit needed a nice place to live, so Whitney had one made, the mother of all houses, on the corner of Woodward and Canfield. It took 4 years to build, between 1890 and 1894. One critic dubbed it pretentious. Maybe yes, maybe no, but it was certainly grand.
And what motivated him, there were, I think, several things. In terms of building a new house, the house that he was living in, he had built with his first wife. Her name was Flora Ann. So when she died and he married her sister, now you had the family living in the house he built with Flora Ann. There were 2 daughters at that point in time were in their early teens, and I think it was probably a bit complicated for the family. By this point in time, and that he married his second wife, Mr. Whitney had become very financially successful. And so there's some people, you can read some things that would tell you that he needed to express, his status, his position. I personally don't believe that was really the case. Not that this house doesn't do that. I mean, it was the largest house in Michigan, probably the largest house in the Midwest when it was built.
What a house it was. The price tag would be maybe $9.5 million in today's money.
So you find a lot of people really interested in the structural details of the house. Then you begin to describe the house, it's 21,000 square feet of living space. It has a 7,000 square foot basement. It had 52 rooms, 218 windows, 20 fireplaces, 10 bathrooms, all connected to a septic system, so they had inside plumbing. There's a central steam heat system.
And if you're Mr. or Mrs. Whitney, you just couldn't walk up the stairs like everybody else.
It was the first house in Detroit to have an elevator. And to have an elevator, you have to have electricity. So in 1893, Thomas Edison himself and his company, which in that point in time would have included Henry Ford, came and electrified the mansion. And so people ask, well, why would Thomas Edison himself come? There are several reasons I could think of, but probably the more pertinent reason is that Mr. Whitney was a major shareholder in the Edison Illumination Company of Detroit. The old saying, follow the money, and so here we are.
He died on November 30th, 1900. The wake was held at his house. What nobody could know was that Whitney's funeral probably should have been the funeral for the lumber era. There wasn't much left to cut down anymore, and even as Whitney was buried, a new generation of tinkerers were building the auto industry, which would eclipse lumber as the state's biggest source of income. The lumber baron's day was done, to be replaced by a budding new generation of auto barons. The house stayed in the Whitney family for a few decades.
By 1920, Detroit was about 1 million people, and what happened to Woodward Avenue is that they converted it into an industrial boulevard. They built cars here. It was noisy, congested, and a great many of the wealthy people who lived along this part of Detroit migrated. Some up to Boston Edison, some over to Indian Village, some over to the Points. And so what happened here was that she dies in 1917. There's a caretaker on site, and he's here to 1930. And then in 1930, the Whitney estate allowed the Wayne County Medical Society to use this mansion for their headquarters. And then about 2 or 3 years later, the estate allowed the Visiting Nurses Association to use the carriage house for their training facility.
The Visiting Nurses Association would have it for a few decades. The neighborhood was getting tough. The house probably would have been destroyed had not a civic-minded local millionaire, Dick Kuhn, bought the place to ensure that this elegant home would not go the way of the wrecking ball. He turned it into what it is now, an elegant restaurant.
And so he was afraid it would get torn down like the rest of the big mansions along Woodward Avenue. And so he bought it to preserve the house, converts it into a restaurant. It takes 6 years and $3 million because you had to bring it up to code. Right. And it opened December the 12th of 1986 as the Whitney.
And in came the ghosts.
The baseline for your spirits probably was with the death of Mr. and Mrs. Whitney.
Which was
he died in 1900, and she died in 1917. And so probably, if you think about it, that is the beginning of the paranormal activity.
Let me interject. Moriarty isn't the kind of guy who's easily fooled. He was educated at Villanova and the University of Pennsylvania, two of the best universities in the country. He worked for NASA, the United States Space Agency. Deborah Fuller works as a server here. She didn't believe it at first either.
There's several things I've encountered throughout. I've been here about 4 years. It started basically the first 2 weeks I started working here, but not everybody gets to experience this. I don't know if they just show themselves or do things for certain people, or maybe just skeptical people like me. There's not as much activity in the house that I've encountered. It's mostly in the carriage house out back. We do investigations all the time. I'm here every Friday, and I take a group in, and we set up audio equipment, video equipment. I have some devices that I use, and we have caught a lot of different things. Mostly it's voices. You'll be asking questions out loud. You don't necessarily hear the responses right away, but when you play back the audio, you will hear distinctly what they're saying. So we'll ask questions like, tell us your name, who are you, why are you here? We will do nursery rhymes, do certain things to maybe like kids would know, because what we hear on audio are little kids' voices, but we just don't know who they are and why they're here.
More from the Haunted Investigators of Michigan.
Would you like me to
This little
bring a
kid
book
saying,
next
yeah.
time and read you a story?
Hear that?
Yeah.
It's a little kid saying, she's saying,
Would you like me to bring a book next time and read you a story?
what happened was, one of our investigators was at Grace's table, which we'll go to, and we had a book, and she says, would you like me to bring a book next time and read you a story? We caught a child saying, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
There are all kinds of theories as to who some of these ghosts are. Deborah Fuller explains the table. One theory, the ghost is that of Grace Whitney, one of David Whitney's daughters who died in 1938.
Grace Whitney's she was one of the daughters,
She was the oldest.
the oldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Flora's daughter.
Yeah,
And she was the first wife.
first wife.
Yeah. So she actually liked to, from what I understand, she liked to stay in the carriage house instead of the mansion itself. So when she would come to visit, she would like to be in the carriage house. She had her own table set up in the back of the carriage house on the second floor where she would have tea. That was her thing. She liked to look at out in the pasture and drink her tea. So the story of the table you mentioned is that you're really not supposed to disturb the table.
And there were others. Now, Richard Kuhn was a pretty tough guy. He made his millions working with Al Taubman. Nothing much frightened Dick Kuhn. When he bought the place, the former owners got a call.
At least when Richard Kuhn bought the house, he of course was cleaning up the house and the carriage house, moved the table.
Oh.
And so now that's 1980. And then that he began seeing a lot of paranormal activities, tables turned over, things, to the point, from what I was told, was that he called the nurses and asked them, because that's where he bought the house, whether or not they knew anything about the paranormal activity. And they asked him if he had moved Grace's table, the table that we had talked about, and he said yes, and they told him to put it back where he found it. And now this is not an elegant table, this is just a plain old table. And he put it back, and the story I was told that when he did that, it all stopped.
The next owner, a former automotive executive by the name of Bud Liebler, had a similar experience when he bought the place from Kuhn in 2007.
He told me that the first or second day that he owned the house, he said he had the only keys, and he was in the house by himself. They closed the restaurant, they were changing the menu, doing certain things. And he was up in his office, which is up here on the third floor, behind where the curtain is. It's on the north end of the house. And he said he had to go to the men's room, so he walked out of his office, and there's about a 12-foot hall until you can turn into the what we call today the Ghost Bar, which originally was Mr. Whitney's art gallery. And he walked down to the men's room here on the south end of the house. And he said when he walked out of his office, there was a nice hall table, narrow table sitting in the hall. He said when he got back and he turned the corner to go into his office, there was a lit candle sitting on the table.
It might have been one of Whitney's 4 children. It could be anybody. Still not convinced? Try this.
Yeah, but there is one picture that we do have that can't be explained, that was taken up on the third floor. A lady, when the bartenders was pouring bottle of Louis XIII, which is very expensive. We opened the bar just for a gentleman that wanted to drink Louis, so of course we opened the bar just for him. There was nobody else here, and when they were taking a picture of her opening the bottle and pouring it, when you zoom in towards the back room, which we used to call the absinthe room, you'll see 3 figures sitting back there, and one on the left looks like a woman that could be Mrs. Whitney. So that's the most famous picture that we have. I have heard giggling out there, and not necessarily late at night. It was in the afternoon, and I was up in the carriage house on the 2nd floor and heard a little kid laughing, which was kind of disturbing, but it was actually kind of neat for me. But we've also heard, when you do you know, familiar with shaving a haircut? Oh, yeah. We get the bump, bump. And I've heard that with my own ears, knocks back.
Audio from the Haunt Investigators of Michigan as they conduct their search.
Shaving a haircut is where you do the knocks and they respond. So it's this. And then you'll get 2 knocks back.
Right.
This is what we captured on audio. So this is actually a spirit doing the shaving a haircut knock for us. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Can you follow this pattern?
Watch.
I just heard that. Was that
That's a
somebody
spirit
back here?
knocking back to us.
Let's take a minute here. What the heck are ghosts? Justin Mazzola is a student of the paranormal. He, too, is not a guy who is easily convinced. He's studying for an advanced degree in anthropology at nearby Wayne State University. He's skeptical about a lot of things, but he's convinced that there is paranormal activity going on here all the time.
And the way that I have come to understand, just based on research that I have done, is that ghosts are essentially disconnected consciousnesses of human beings devoid of physical restraints. So it's essentially a ball of energy that was once a sentient creature or human being that is now unrestricted because they do not have a body any longer. So obviously, as entities with free thought, we tend to continue to want to do things that we did when we were alive. So the way that I see ghosts that stick around is that they either have, and what you would probably hear in like a horror movie or a ghost story, is that they have unfinished business, meaning that there's something that is here on the physical plane that is being that entity around. And the way that a ghost functions, I mean, this is all based on theories, but I mean, they work. If they're just a ball of energy, they're giving out as much as they're putting in.
He's been involved in numerous ghost investigations, and they have made him a believer.
So they have a female member on the team, and she had gone to use the bathroom in the middle of one of their hunts, and this is according to her. So she comes out of the bathroom, and there is just this teddy bear like in the sink that they swear just manifested like out of thin air in front of, and like not like in front of her, but like while she was in the stall. And she's the only person that was there, and everyone else was elsewhere. And you know, you're just going off of like what they're telling you, right? And so she takes the teddy bear, and it's like for lack of a better term, like a cursed object. So she takes this thing and she's immediately enthralled by it. So she carries it around everywhere. They bring it to all the hunts, and it's like anytime she's separated from the bear, she has like severe anxiety. Really? And they have, to this day, they have no idea where it came from. The only reason I even like found out about it is because I saw her like walking around with it, and I kind of made a joke about it. And then one of the investigators pulled me aside and told me the story, and I'm just like, that's wild. So, and that's just kind of another way that spirit, you know, connects itself to this world, and that there's that they connect themselves to objects that they care about. So their theory is that, the teddy bear belonged to one of the Whitney daughters, and that it just kind of like, attached itself to this girl just because she was there. And this all happened on that's the third floor bathroom, which is adjacent to what is now known as the Ghost Bar.
Sometimes the investigators go in with special video cameras, and this is where it gets a little scary, especially in the carriage house behind the Whitney.
Grace was the oldest daughter of David Whitney. When she lived abroad, when she come back, she used to sit up here and have tea. Now they say anytime you disturb the tea set, she makes herself known. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this Ouija board. By paranology, it's called a gyroscope, and to see if we can get her or somebody here to actually stop. There's a yes and no on here. There's also letters of the alphabet. If we can get them to learn how to stop at one of the letters, maybe we'll get a name or a response.
And so we would go into the carriage house, and they'd set up these screens, and you could actually see like stick figures manifesting. And so I'm skeptical in terms of like, it could just be like spotty heat signatures that are creating like, effects that look like humans. But then you start to see them like posturing. They'll like look like they're in different positions. So we would look up. The craziest thing that I saw is when I was on that ghost hunt is that they pointed it up in the rafters, and you could see like the stick figures, like a bunch of them just kind of like sitting. They were in like seated positions on like the rafter barricades. And that was the wild, even if you could logic your way out of that, you won't ever see anything more horrifying in your life, because you're like, well, we're here. And according to your technology, there's just a bunch of ghosts like sitting up in the rafters. It was very, very scary in the moment.
In the end, there's still a ton of stuff we don't know, which is maybe the thing about ghosts. They don't exactly carry business cards.
All right, if there's somebody here, you can use the lights on either side. One of the lights, actually, if you get enough energy, it will make it stop at yes or no. The other side actually will get it to stop at letters, so you can actually spell out your name if you're here. Can you tell us if you're a male or a female? Stop at one of the lights. Here we go. Okay. See the lights?
Mazzola says sometimes you just feel it in your bones that something is going on here.
So the downstairs of the Whitney is just storage and, kind of like random abandoned rooms that don't really have anything in them. And then there's this one room, and it's I want to say it was used as like a tannery where they would like hang animals, dry them out. It's just this brick room, looks like a giant oven. It's like very off-putting. And in the back of that room is an even darker room that just has nothing in it. And so I'm innately curious. So I'm downstairs with the team that I'm on, and I'm walking into this room, and the psychic lady grabs my shoulder. This is the first words I've ever heard this lady speak all night. And she's like, I don't think you should go in there. It seems very upset. And I'm looking at her. I'm like, what's it? And why is it upset? And she's just like, I'm just getting something very negative, and I don't really think you should go in there. And I'm like, thumbs up. Cool. Not going in there. And it's, kind of the same thing we were talking about. Like, went in there, and like before she even said anything, I had this feeling. I'm just like, oh man, this feels really bad. I don't know if I should be in here. And then she said something to me.
The great writer William Faulkner once said, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." Maybe he's right. The lumber barons aren't gone, nor are their offspring. And it's yet another thing that makes the Whitney unique. Just don't mess with Grace Whitney's table in the carriage house. She'll let you know about it. Thanks for listening. I'm Tim Kiska. This being a collaborative effort, here's on the team Eric Kiska, Associate Producer, Managing Editor, and Social Media Director, Kelly Kiska, Web and Graphic Design, Bob Koski, Associate Producer and Audio Engineer, Bill Kubota, Video, and Tom Ferguson, Copy Editor.